friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia, and I'm so glad you guys are here today to listen kind of to my story and some advice that I have for you guys that I think is really important. At least it was really important for me. So yeah, I'm super excited to share this. It's kind of more of like a story, and then I'll give you guys some advice. So yeah, I guess that's kind of it. Let's get into it. Last year, at the end of the summer, I participated in an MA, which is called a Mission Adventures. The organization I work for, / my parents work for, they have this thing where youth groups come down, they fly down from different areas all around the world, and we serve them for a whole week, and we do these passion plays, these worship nights, and we go out to ministries around the community in Mexico. And a base 45 minutes away from my home base, they decided to do this exact program for the kids of the staff. This meant so much to most of the staff kids because we were being seen and we were being just poured into. It was such an amazing experience with so many good missionary opportunities, but I really got exhausted from this. It was like 8 days of this consistent learning and processing and learning something new and processing that and all of that. It was a lot. The first 3 days I did great. I started to deteriorate and get tired, and it became hard for me to process what was coming into my head. The sermons were so amazing, but it became like blurred between all of this stuff, and I was trying to process and like, how does this apply to my life and all this stuff, and it just got really difficult. Whatever happened after that, I just became super like scared and self-deprecating in my faith. I would open my Bible in the morning, it would be a chore because I had to go to the Old Testament and I had to highlight it exactly, these information, I had to get context clues and all of this to make sure I was reading it right. I got so hyper fixated on just trying to read it right, interpret the text right, understand these verses and all of this stuff that I lost track of my relationship with God, what it was supposed to be, and what a relationship with God looks like, and what the Bible is. I just became super absorbed in trying to worship right at worship services. Do I lift up one hand, both hands? What is everyone else around me doing? Am I doing it right was the big question I had. I didn't know if I was interpreting verses right. What if I was completely interpreting them wrong and then I had this wrong message I was living like my life with? What if I read that verse wrong and now I'm out in the world doing the wrong thing? I just felt so confused and lost, and I had so many questions and I couldn't answer any of them. And the more I tried to answer the questions, the more they got overwhelming and the more questions that came filling in. There were just so many questions that I couldn't answer, and it became so overwhelming and stressful. I remember when I went to my parents' room and I was trying to articulate some questions I had, or like trying to ask them for help. I couldn't articulate anything to them. I just started crying, sobbing, and I just couldn't figure out why I couldn't answer any of these questions. Normally, if I had a question, I would write it out in my little journal and process through and pray, right? And be like, God, please help me like answer this question. And then by the end of the journal, by the end of that page, I'd have everything figured out or have an understanding of what I should do next. I've always been able to do that. But I was so blocked that I couldn't write anything. I couldn't articulate anything, and all the questions I couldn't even like ask a specific question like, oh, I have a question about this verse. It was just the whole Bible in general. I was confused and I lost sight of what the Bible was and what a relationship with God looks like, and I was so hyper fixated on trying to do it right. I can't articulate. That was the exact problem. At this time, my dad just saw how distraught I was and how like worried and scared I was that I couldn't answer these questions. He looked at me and he said, keep it simple. This probably was the biggest lesson I learned in 2023. I started college classes in the fall. I was doing a full-time college course online. I was doing it like high school and college, and it was this big thing, and everyone was so impressed that I could do this, but it was stressful and it was hard at times, and I'm managing a cafe in this Mexico. I gotta make sure I don't cost this space money. I gotta make sure I can do all this stuff. All of these things going in my head, and all of trying to keep a relationship with people around me. All of this stuff was just going in my head, and I felt like I couldn't think anymore. And he looked at me and he was like, keep it simple. I cannot stress, if you are type A, workaholic, you have to be perfect, all of this, if you're anything like me, this is such an important lesson. Another thing that closely followed this whole keep it simple concept was, you don't have to know the answer. It's not your job to know every single answer. That's God's, and He already does. So you don't have to worry about that. Having so many questions unanswered and just being told you don't have to answer them was a hard pill to swallow because I wanted to answer all of them. But I knew that God didn't want me to answer all of these questions, that He wanted me to be okay, and He wanted me to trust Him. So after that, trying to turn my Bible from a chore to what I loved again, and learning more about God and my Savior, how I kind of did that, I want to share it with you guys. So if you guys are in any similar situation to me, maybe this could help. I went back to what I knew. I read the New Testament. I read Matthew. I memorized Matthew a couple years prior for a Bible quiz competition over the year. I memorized it and I quizzed over it, like I really understood it, so like I know all the background for it. But I reopened it. And I read it unselfishly. I read it not how this can help me, but how this can teach me about who's God's character, who is His character, what does He have for us, you know? And I read that, and I started reading the Bible unselfishly. Not reading it to fix myself, not reading it to come up with a verse that I'm gonna live my life. Does this verse relate to me? How does this verse relate to me? I read the Bible, how does this verse relate to God? How does this verse show God's character? Because that's what the Bible is. It's God's character being shown again and again and again. And I kind of forgot how much value there was in that. Just learning about His character is going to answer so many questions for you. And again, one of the questions is, again, like I said, am I doing this right? And after reading my Bible and all this stuff, God doesn't want us to do it right. God doesn't want us to be this perfect cookie cutter faith that everyone has. He wants us to have childlike faith. He wants us to trust Him and believe in Him. And those are just some of the things that I learned when I started reading the Bible unselfishly. Another thing I did is because I'm a big overthinker. I'm an overthinker. I'm just overworker. Over everything, over emotions. So much emotion for me are always going around. And another thing I did when my dad said keep it simple is I rationalized these feelings. I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Okay, let me take a breath. Let me take a second. Let me try to understand why I'm feeling overwhelmed, okay? Feeling overwhelmed because I feel like I have to be perfect. Okay, now speak truth into that. I don't have to be perfect because Jesus is perfect. And He died so that I could ask for forgiveness. And forgiveness is 100% okay to ask for every day, all the time. You should be constantly asking for forgiveness and asking for help. That's why God gave us His Son, so that we didn't have to be perfect. This is by far the biggest lesson I've personally learned from 2023. And I also want to say that I'm not just preaching this to you, I'm preaching this to myself. I overwork myself a lot. So I'm trying to learn currently how to have productive rest. I want to learn how to rest, but I want to learn how to take my restful time and make it productive, and maybe learn some things in this time of rest, you know, like a new hobby or doing things that value while I'm resting has been really hard for me because I don't feel accomplished unless I'm working, which is something I'm gonna have to work on. And I'm admitting that right here, that I'm preaching again. As much as I'm preaching to you, I'm preaching to myself. I need to be held accountable as much as you guys on this, because I am so like perfectionist that it just hurts to not know the answers, to not be able to work, to not feel fulfilled when I'm working. All of those things, it's okay. It's okay to not know. It's okay to not be perfect. And God fulfills. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you found value and hopefully some advice in this video if you're anything like me. Comment down below any like video ideas you have, any concepts you'd like me to cover. I love to research them and try to answer some questions for you guys. I love doing that. I love trying to answer questions, like I've said, but I am learning how to answer questions. So comment down below anything and let's try to work out some of these questions that we have together. I would personally love that. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.